Hello, everyone. Today, I'm honored to present our paper titled Investigating the Effects of Egocentric FPV versus Exocentric TPV Perspectives and Collaboration Modes on Sense of Agency in VR. As virtual reality expands into remote collaboration, particularly in teleoperating robots, we are faced with critical design choices. Two primary factors are the visual perspective, whether to use an egocentric first-person view, FPV, or an exocentric third-person view, TPV, and the collaboration mode, which defines how decision-making and execution authority are distributed between the human and the robot. To evaluate these choices, we utilize the theoretical framework of the sense of agency. Sense of agency is the I did that feeling, which means the match between our actions and their results. It is fundamental to our planning, learning, and social responsibility. Sense of agency is generally understood to comprise two components: an implicit feeling of agency driven by low-level sensorimotor processes, and an explicit judgment of agency based on higher-level cognitive evaluation. This study investigates how perspective and collaboration mode might interact to shape these different dimensions of the sense of agency. We implemented a 2 by 3 within subjects experimental design. The perspective factor included the egocentric FPV and the exocentric TPV. For the collaboration mode, we designed 3 levels of automation. Direct remote control, where participants handled both decision-making and manual execution. Supervisory cooperation, where participants only made decisions and the robot navigated autonomously. Spectator mode, where the robot operated with full autonomy and participants passively observed. Participants were tasked with controlling a robot through a pathfinding mission across 3 platforms. The experiment in each trial is: first, platforms 1 and 2. User controlled a robot via VR to perform a pathfinding task. Next, platform 3. User performed an intentional binding task to measure their implicit feeling of agency. To capture the multifaceted nature of the sense of agency, we employed a multimodal assessment approach. Explicit judgment of agency was measured using subjective questionnaires. For the implicit feeling of agency, we utilized 2 objective measures: the intentional binding IB effect, where participants estimated the temporal interval between their action and an auditory cue, and the amplitude of the auditory N100 event-related potential via EEG. Additionally, we assessed participants' levels of cybersickness using the VRSQ. Let's look at the findings. For the explicit judgment of agency, our results revealed a significant main effect solely for the collaboration mode. Active modes, direct remote control, and supervisory cooperation yielded significantly higher explicit judgment of agency than the passive spectator mode. Visual perspective did not appear to have a significant effect. This might suggest that as long as users are involved in the decision-making process, their explicit, conceptual sense of agency remains relatively high. However, an interesting dissociation emerges when we examine the implicit feeling of agency. For the IB effect, we observed a significant interaction between perspective and collaboration mode. Under FPV, direct remote control elicited a significantly stronger IB effect than the other modes. But under TPV, these differences among collaboration modes seemed to disappear. The EEG N100 results also showed a significant interaction effect, mirroring the FPV/TPV difference. Consistent with the IB findings, the N100 results demonstrated no significant differences among the 3 collaboration modes under the TPV condition. Yet, there is a nuanced difference within the FPV condition. The N100 amplitude for supervisory cooperation was closer to that of direct remote control. This could indicate that the N100 component is primarily sensitive to the user's role as a decision-maker, whereas the IB effect might require the combination of both decision-making and physical execution to reach its peak. How might we interpret this dissociation? It appears that the implicit feeling of agency is deeply tied to an egocentric reference frame. The FPV provides direct sensoromotor feedback, sustaining the low-level prediction loop. Conversely, the exocentric TPV necessitates a coordinate transformation, which could potentially disrupt these primitive mechanisms of implicit agency. Explicit judgment of agency, on the other hand, seems cognitively flexible enough to bridge this spatial gap via high-level causal inference. Regarding cybersickness, the FPV direct remote control condition induced the highest levels of sickness. This is possibly due to a stronger sensoromotor conflict, where the user's strong intention to move conflicts with their stationary physical body. It is noteworthy that the patterns observed in motion sickness appear to parallel the implicit sense of agency as indexed by intentional binding. However, there is currently no evidence to suggest a direct correlation between these two phenomena. A plausible explanation is that the high congruence between motor commands and visual feedback enhances the sense of agency, while simultaneously creating a sensory mismatch between the anticipation of self-motion and the stationary state of the body, thereby precipitating elevated levels of motion sickness. In conclusion, our study suggests that the sense of agency in VR teleoperation is not a unitary concept, but rather a multifaceted experience co-shaped by the user's visual perspective and their functional role. For the design of future VR-based human robot systems, these findings offer novel insights. If the goal is an intuitive, immersive experience, FPV is likely superior. However, if the scenario prioritizes supervision, strategic decision-making, and minimizing cyber sickness, a TPV approach, or an FPV approach with supervisory cooperation, holds notable merit. Thank you for your time and attention.